Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when you come in as a night watchman, you have two choices. You either be very cautious or you lick out hard.
Colonel, you understand cricket.
Mr. Speaker, I commend you for your forbearance.
Mr. Thwaites, I wish to hear you
Indeed.
address the Speaker. Proceed.
You know, Mr. Speaker, since your elevation, two things have happened. One, your patience and forbearance has enlarged considerably. And can you imagine having to sit through these endless episodes of verbiage? Yes? And you don't even have the privilege of a bathroom rest or to relieve your head of the umbrella of encumbrance upon which you have embarked. Thank you very much for your patience, sir. I wonder about the usefulness of the sectoral debate as it is planned. I find many of the members, my colleagues, are hurrying through their presentation. We're working against time. We are hoping for a small media bite. Most of the time we're talking about things we hope to happen rather than things that can happen right now. And I'm wondering whether there ought to be some consideration by you who have the power as to the structure of the sectoral debate over perhaps the next few years. Mr. Speaker, in that regard, I thought you'd say that. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I don't think a useful purpose would be served in reciting the efforts at the Ministry of Education over the past 4 years. What we have done and what we have tried to do and what we may have been challenged to complete are well known. I would like to, first of all, offer my thanks to the very patient and long-suffering people of Central Kingston who have offered me the opportunity once again to be here. And I'm so happy to hear of the plans for urban renewal, which would include some of their fortunes as set out earlier. The members of the constituency are present, and I welcome and accord them the respect that they have given to me. Mr. Speaker, I intend, and so does the opposition, to maintain the common front regarding education policy that has characterized Jamaica for the past several years. This requires decency and civility to avert the tribal instincts, especially among those who don't have the experience as to the futility and the boomerang of tribalism. And in this regard, I'd like to particularly thank, although she excused her absence to me, the Member of Parliament for South Trelawney and the present Minister of Foreign Affairs, who were very fine and cooperative collaborators during my time as Minister. I hope it will continue. I do hope so. Anyone would note the tightness of the education budget this year, and this must be contrasted with some of the expansive promises that have been made and must all be fulfilled. May I recommend that any realignment of expenditure in education should be to further transform the early childhood sector. We need to hurry beyond the almost 50% of trained teachers in the sector. Yes. We need to reaffirm the 2018 target of a trained teacher in every early childhood institution and a trained special education teacher available to every early childhood and primary school. I commend the government for a very good choice as chairman of the Early Childhood Commission. She's a dynamic person and will do well. Doing it right the first time is the most effective and economical way of transforming life through education. There is a value added of 17 times for every dollar spent on early childhood education. And I applaud the resolve that has been spoken of for the Ministry of Education to partner with the Ministry of Health to institute an early stimulation project. Unfortunately, the allocation of only $30 million from education demeans the importance of the venture, but I recommend the rural family support system where caregivers go to homes and assist young parents some of them children themselves, and poverty-stricken people who need special support, which is now barely available. I offer full support, too, for the continuation of a scholarship program for teachers, especially in the critical areas of mathematics and science. We must make sure that those teachers are bonded and incentivized to stay in the system. Incentives are important. Education and the market are not the same thing, but there must be elements of the market engaging in the education process, and we can no longer tarry in that regard. The rule of thumb that I would recommend to government is to spend 3 times more on preventing poor outcomes as you allocate for remediation, which is so often expensive and unsuccessful. And may I associate the member from Northeast Manchester in this regard, because you have always claimed, and Mr. Speaker, he has insisted that embedding the early childhood system in the best way possible is the way to have long-term dividends in education. All the science, local and foreign, agrees that the critical period for brain and personality development takes place by grade 4, age 8. Will the government accept the opposition's advocacy to gradually increase from 16% to 20% the proportion of the education budget devoted to schooling, stimulation, nutrition, and family support up to that level? Spend it on the critical areas of socialization, nutrition, and instruction, and we will see the results in the medium term. In a perfect world, Speaker, where state resources were plentiful and reliable, of course it would be a good thing to offer all important social services free of cost. And what more important ones than health and education? Ideally, the same people receiving the benefits would be the same people paying for them by way of taxes. That is the historic and the current principle of the People's National Party. We believe that it is helpful to relieve hard-pressed parents from every obstacle of affordability, from that most critical tool of development, the attainment of high levels of education and training. But I submit that the priority area of need in allocation of resources is the primary sector. If you have more money, put it there. All require contributions now. And I commend, I think it is the member from part of St. Elizabeth, who has indicated in the press that he wants to give particular assistance to the primary schools. The primary schools in Jamaica are hopelessly underfunded, and they're the ones who need the help. Parents, benefactors, members of parliament, and companies are reallocating their customary support for auxiliary fees because they are told that the state is in a position to provide full funding. I encourage government to listen to the principals, the school boards, and the teachers' union. They are saying that in our current financial situation, quality education will require continuing financial contributions from all who can afford to contribute, ensuring always that those who cannot pay are never prejudiced. And by the way, changing the name from auxiliary to voluntary contributions is really a sleight of hand, ill-befitting an honorable government. Truth cannot be the bedfellow of parody. Take, for example, Mr. Speaker, here is the release to the parents from perhaps the best and most highly regarded high school in Jamaica. It reads, "The contribution you are asked to make towards your daughter's education at this school for the academic year 2016-2017 is $30,000. There is therefore no increase. The Minister of Education has asked all schools to set aside the term auxiliary fee and find new names for the amounts parents are asked to pay. As discussed at the Homeschool Association meeting held at Name School in June, your contribution of $30,000 will now be referred to as a collab fee. COLLAB. For the smooth running of our school in 2016-2017, it is imperative that the collab fee be paid by each parent." Well, I don't need to say much more on that. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to note the statement by the Minister that the schools will be adequately funded and will not be found wanting in any way. And we on this side say not $1 less than they need. The schools need the fees and the contributions. We need the $19,000, which no school will get for all students, in order to ensure high-quality education. I'd like to alert the government to the situation at the Student Loan Bureau, which has indicated a loss of about 25% of its revenue from the long-awaited transition of its loan book from compound to simple interest. Further capitalization is needed to avoid serious underfunding of university students. I suggest the resumption of discussions with the licensed financial institutions to make capital available on affordable terms. The Minister of State in Finance spoke about the ability of our banks to further help development. This is an absolutely low-hanging fruit where our students who will enter the labor market and have the best prospect of repayment are as yet unable to secure assistance to complete their education from the financial institutions. I note also with happiness the European Union, despite its vicissitudes at the present time, taking a new direction towards grants for tertiary education. Mr. Speaker, there is, however, one extremely important issue relating to education and going broader than that, which I wish to spend the rest of this brief presentation on. You know, sir, there are some vital things that we in Jamaica don't want to talk about because they are too sensitive, but they are unavoidable as we move our nation and people forward. Our Prime Minister has spoken appropriately, but without details so far, about changing the Jamaican citizens' mindset towards wholesome values and attitudes. And I wish to follow him on a particular aspect of this scheme this afternoon. Nowhere is this more important than in respect of the responsibilities of fatherhood, and I associate myself with the remarks from the member from St. Anne just concluded. Mr. Speaker, listen to the example of Shanice Henry in the Gleaner, published in the Gleaner on Monday. See her here? A young mother pleads for help. This is a girl who says that she grew up in Old Harbor along with her siblings, described her upbringing as a daily routine of physical, verbal, and later sexual abuse. The story goes on that she's put on the streets because when she goes to her father for help, he tells her no, he can't help her, and she must go back to where she came from. She eventually gets the child because she's raped, and she's on the street begging now. May I advert you to, and this Honourable House, the story so lyrically expressed in The Observer on Sunday of Shauna K. Lester, a very, very well accomplished young lady, and the title of it is Daddy Wasn't There. So I stole. She speaks of stealing father figures. Unfortunately, through her church and her universities, etc., she was able to achieve this. The missing element is the father. Look at the survey for living conditions, Mr. Speaker. Yes, may I quote briefly? Parental demographics and family structure have been widely accepted as factors that have a long-term impact on child outcomes. All the things we've been talking about, health, crime, economic development, productivity, the Honourable Minister this afternoon. Family structure, such as the number of parenting figures, have been shown to affect the behavioral and educational outcomes of young children. May I continue by pointing out that in the early childhood cohort, the figures I believe here are 2013, nearly 40% of children had no birth father living with them, nor if any effective relationship with their birth father. Mr. Speaker, can I tell you the story of the twins? Both are students at a prominent high school who go to their father, sent by their mother, to get their money for school. And he tells them he has none to give them. He gives them $100 each after they have spent $500 to get there. This is last week. And he tells them to go back where they come from because their mother is a so-and-so. Or what happens to the other person of my acquaintance, Mr. Speaker, in the area I represent, who goes to her father regularly for money, and she gets the money, but she has to give sexual favors. And when she's not in a physical position to do so, she gets no money. Yes? What about the 21-year-old grandmother who I met 2 years ago on High Holborn Street in central Kingston, Mr. Speaker? 21. She had her child at 10, and her daughter has had a child at 11. Yes? And there is no father that is a parent in each case. I only know of one Immaculate Conception. Where are the fathers in these equations? How serious is this? Take the story of many of the school principals who have stories about delinquent students. Invariably, students without father's positive influence. One principal yesterday told me that if she has had to deal with 50 serious cases of male delinquency in her school, everyone, not some, everyone has been occasioned by the absence of an effective father figure. So many of us need to give thanks for the single parents who have raised us. They are the heroines. They are the heroines of the broken Jamaican family structure. But it's an unfair burden, Mr. Speaker, to place upon mostly our women. I'm surprised that we seldom hear this issue of the unfair burden of single motherhood raised in our discussions and colloquies on gender issues. It is the most crushing and oppressive situation that we have incubated and which is growing, not diminishing. Carry me to your constituencies, members of this honorable House, and you'll see some of the fathers caring for their children. Come with me to parade downtown early any morning and see the number of men accompanying their children to school. Thank God for them. But unhappily, they are not the norm. The largest cohort of our children, we know over 40% of them, grow without the security of parents who, most likely not married, are not able to effectively combine and efforts and resources for the young they have birthed. Mr. Speaker, it is arguable that the worst shackle of transatlantic slavery was the breaking apart of the African family tradition. This has been followed by rampant hedonism of more recent times. The situation has been aggravated, indeed, by persistent poverty, unemployment, and migration, which accentuate wayward tendencies. But we can't stop and just cry for all the negative results. We have to do something about it. The national cultural principle must recognize that children benefit from having stable relationships between their mothers and fathers. This has become the norm. This has to become the norm of personal relationships when there are children. Mr. Speaker, girls need their fathers, not taxi drivers, to teach them how to relate to men. Boys need good fathers, not gangsters, dons, or foul-mouthed artists, to teach them how to become strong, loving, respectful, and productive men. These things impact on the education system as much as oversized classes and inadequate teachers and a paucity of money. There are many things that we can do within our resources if we have the political will and the social influence. At Foundation, Mr. Speaker, we have to take the lead in reasserting to the national culture that individual liberty and satisfaction cannot be divorced from personal responsibility, and that the arena in which personal responsibility, sacrifice, the postponement of gratification, do we know that term in Jamaica very well, Mr. Speaker? The postponement of gratification is most immediately and acutely to be demonstrated in effective parenting, and even more particularly in devoted fathering. In 2009, Mr. Speaker, this Parliament was given the assurance that within a short time it would be mandatory for every child's birth certificate to bear their father's name. We didn't do it then, but we can do it now. It would require very little by way of legislative change. A parent who is delinquent in their responsibilities to their children should not be able to travel, get licenses renewed, be awarded contracts, be lionized with honors and social pedigree while their spouse and children languish. We can do something about that. Other countries do so regularly. And could we review and improve the operations of the family courts? A wonderful introduction into the justice system, but not one now too clogged with delays to give meaningful relief to many. Mr. Speaker, a structured family life creates the base for upward mobility and productivity. The reverse is what we have too much of. Check the unclaimed old fathers on the hospital wards, the aged but no longer psychotic patients in Bellevue Hospital, the twisted young inmates in the prisons, and the thousands of dysfunctional children in our schools. Migration, mobility, and many other factors have broken down the extended family. And so, given the weakness of family structure and positive community influences, the Jamaican school has now become the main institution of positive socialization for the majority of our children. If that is so, all of us must help to discharge this unaccustomed and onerous responsibility. First, by modeling and instructing a wholesome understanding of personal relationships, of human sexuality, of the value and happiness of making lasting commitments. Many of our men and women don't want to make commitments. If you're raising children, you must make a commitment to those children. We scream to high heaven, Mr. Speaker, about the advancing gay culture. But I don't think it ought to be the concern of highest priority. The real threat is from non-existent or weak heterosexual unions and their maladjusted children. Mr. Speaker, our teachers will have to be the best models of good family life. I remember former Prime Minister Patterson telling the story of the late Mr. Hewling, his teacher, one of the teachers at Somerton Primary School, who in the absence of his own father took him by the hand on the first day in school and introduced him to what school life would be and saw to it that he was protected and cared for. That's what we need. The health and family life curriculum must early project a new normal, that of women and men committing to a lasting partnership before, not after children are conceived, or at least making that commitment to their children's well-being as soon as possible. The purpose of these remarks, Mr. Speaker, is to stimulate a discussion at all levels, not in a judgmental way, not accusing anyone, of the crucial importance of stable family relations as the foundation of good outcomes in education and consequently in societal peace and productivity. Mr. Speaker, if we restore stability and faithfulness in our families, there will be better outcomes from our schools. When we have well-educated, self-confident graduates from our schools, personal lives will have the best chance to thrive, and our nation will grow not only in GDP indices, but in peace and well-being. Mr. Speaker, I remember the Rhodes Scholar from last year, a fine young lady from Glenmuir High School. Yes? And when she told her story of how she had achieved those heights from modest beginnings in Clarendon, sir, she told the story of parents who, with limited resources, would bring her dinner from Clarendon to the Mona campus every Sunday afternoon, just to show that they cared. Mr. Speaker, can we affirm with your authority and from this House that the most important task that any adult Jamaican can do is to be a good natural or surrogate parent? Bigger than Prime Minister, bigger than any of us here, to be a good parent. And then, Mr. Speaker, if that were to be, why then, by act of our own will, we don't need any help from the IMF in this regard or from any guineagogs from abroad. By our own will and effort, not a great deal more money than we have now, Jamaica, I think, will be better poised than ever to play our part in the development of the whole human race. May it please you, I thank you.